November 3rd, 1878, dawned like any other morning on the Nebraska frontier. The sun rose over the vast plains, casting long shadows across the small homestead, where Mary Harson lived with her 3 kids. 10-year-old Daisy was already pitching in with chores, while 4-year-old Mabel and 2-year-old Jessie played nearby. But as the sun came up, something dark stirred in that house. Stephen D. Richards, a 22-year-old with cold, steel-gray eyes and an eerie calm, got out of bed quietly. He stepped outside, grabbed a sturdy spade, and started digging a hole in the chilly Nebraska dirt. What happened next would cement Richards as Nebraska's first documented serial killer. By the end of the day, 4 innocent lives would be snuffed out by an axe in the hands of a man who felt nothing but satisfaction. He buried an entire family in that pre-dug grave, then sat down to eat breakfast, the blood of children still fresh under his nails. This wasn't Richards' first killing, and by his own admission, it wouldn't be his last. But this crime would finally bring Nebraska's coldest predator to justice. Stephen Decatur Richards was born on March 18, 1856, in Wheeling, Virginia. America was teetering on the edge of civil war, but the Richards family lived a quiet life, far from the political storm. Stephen had 5 sisters and a brother. When he was 6, his world shifted. The family moved to Ohio, first to Monroe County, then to Noble County, before settling in the Quaker village of Mount Pleasant when Stephen was 11. This religious community shaped his early years, but not the way his devout Methodist mother hoped. Richards later described his mom as deeply religious, while his dad, a farmer, didn't follow any faith. This contrast might have contributed to the moral void that would later define Stephen. His mother made him attend church and Sunday school, creating a mask of devotion that hid something sinister growing inside him. At school in Mount Pleasant, Richards said teachers saw him as well-behaved. To everyone around, he was a model kid from a good family, articulate, smart, and the kind of young man any parent would trust. This charm and deception would become his deadliest tools. The first crack in this perfect image showed up when Stephen was 15. On September 16, 1871, his mother died unexpectedly. Losing the moral anchor in his life seemed to unleash something dormant. Friends and family noticed changes in Stephen, but no one saw them as red flags. Until he was 20, he lived with his family, working for local farmers in Ohio. He even got engaged to Anna Milhorn, writing her letters that painted him as a loving fiancé. But Stephen was already living a double life. He started hanging out with shady characters, passing counterfeit bills he got from a guy in New York City. The church-going young man was secretly dabbling in crime and fraud, using his respectable image to cover his tracks. In February 1876, he left Mount Pleasant, heading west for better opportunities. He told his fiancée and neighbors he was chasing his fortune on the frontier, but he didn't mention his growing hunger for something far darker than counterfeiting. Stephen's journey took him to Iowa, where he worked as a farmhand in Burlington and Morning Sun. The work was honest but dull, not the adventure he craved. Then he landed a job at the Iowa Lunatic Asylum in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, burying deceased patients. For most, this would have been a grim task. For Stephen, it was a turning point that shaped him into one of America's first documented serial killers. The New York Times later wrote that his time at the asylum was a pivotal moment, reshaping his view of humanity. Day after day, Stephen handled the bodies of people who died forgotten. He denied seeing any patient abuse, but later admitted that burying corpses made him see people as nothing more than meat. This chilling shift didn't happen instantly. Month by month, body by body, Stephen stripped away his own humanity. The kid who once sat in Sunday school was starting to see life as worthless, death as ordinary, and suffering as meaningless. He was turning into a predator. Richards left the asylum in October 1876 and drifted through the Midwest. No longer the same person. The seeds of violence, planted and watered by constant exposure to death, grew in his growing lack of empathy. He worked odd jobs, sometimes running with train robbers, and stayed briefly in Kansas City before heading to Nebraska, passing through Hastings and arriving in Kearney. The frontier was perfect for someone who wanted to reinvent himself. Out here, a man's past mattered less than his ability to survive. Richards claimed he got into gunfights during his travels, shooting men and not checking if they lived or died. In his own words, he was already solving problems with violence. The pattern was forming, but the worst was yet to come. In a confession after his final arrest, Richards admitted to killing 4 men in Nebraska and Iowa between 1876 and 1877. These weren't desperate acts of self-defense or crimes of passion. They were calculated murders by a man who killed without remorse. He described his first murder in late 1876, 2 weeks after arriving in Kearney. While traveling on horseback, he met a man, and they camped near Town. What should have been a simple traveler's encounter turned deadly. They gambled over cards, with Richards winning most of the man's money. The next morning, as they rode toward Kearney, the man demanded his money back. Richards refused, and when the man got aggressive, Richards shot him above the left eye, killing him instantly. He checked the body to confirm death and dumped it in the Platte River. The chilling part isn't just the violence, it's how methodically Richards covered his tracks, disposing of the body and running water to wash away evidence. This wasn't panic. It was the work of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Days later, near Walker's Ranch, Richards met another man who'd seen him with the first victim. The man, a friend and business partner of the dead traveler, asked questions. Instead of lying and moving on, Richards chose murder. When the man turned his back, Richards shot him in the head, disposed of the body, and sold the man's horse. 2 men were dead because Richards couldn't risk being caught. Rather than feeling guilt, he seemed to grow bolder. His next stop was telling. He stayed with Jasper Harlson, a train robber in Kearney. Mary, Jasper's wife, noticed blood on Richards' shirt and commented on it. He hadn't noticed the stain and brushed it off, joking it must have come from the men he'd killed. The conversation ended, but even in jest, Richards was telling the truth. His mask of respectability was slipping, but not enough for anyone to see him as a threat. The murders continued, each following a pattern. Violence from ordinary encounters, followed by careful evidence disposal. In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Richards used counterfeit money to buy a horse and buggy. When the seller realized the bills were fake and demanded real money or the return of his property, Richards shot him, buried the body, and left. 3 men were now dead, each killed for smaller reasons. Murder was becoming an easy fix for Richards, a man who felt nothing for his victims. His 4th murder showed how casually he viewed human life. In March 1877, Richards and a man named Jemji rode from Grand Island to Kearney. They camped near the Platte River, and at 3 a.m., Richards woke Jemji, saying it was time to move. Jemji, angry at being woken early, argued. Richards later recounted the exchange. "It's a good thing you don't mean all you say," I said. "But I do mean it," he said. "You don't want to mean it," I said. Jemji grabbed his revolver, cocked it, and said, "Here's something that backs all I say." Richards thought, "The fool acts as if he means to shoot," pulled his own gun, and shot Jemji in the head. A man died over being woken too early. Richards' casual words, "plugged him one in the head," show how disconnected he'd become. Jemji wasn't a person to him, just a problem to eliminate. By 1878, Richards had a deadly routine, but his worst crimes were still ahead. In June 1878, he was jailed in Kearney for larceny, a charge he claimed was false. There, he met Mary L. Harlson, arrested for allegedly helping her husband and another prisoner escape. Mary was struggling to survive on the frontier with her 3 kids, Daisy, Mabel, and Jessie. Her outlaw husband had left her to face the law alone, making her vulnerable, the perfect target for Richards. They agreed she'd sell him her property deed 6 months later for $600, about $17,000 today. It looked like a business deal, but Richards was setting up his most horrific crime. After his release, he traveled Nebraska, doing business in Hastings, Bloomington, and Grand Island before arriving at Mary's homestead on October 18, 1878. She transferred the property, and he stayed for weeks. Some reports suggest they married, but this was likely a scam. After killing a family, he ate in the same house where their bodies lay. He buried them in the hole and, when asked about their disappearance, lied that they'd left with Brown. For weeks, he lived in their house working their stolen land, acting like a man wronged by a family who'd abandoned him. But Richards wasn't done. On December 9, 1878, he agreed to help his neighbor, 26-year-old Swedish immigrant Peter Anderson, with work on his property. Anderson, hard-working and trusting, was the kind of man the frontier needed. After eating a meal Richards prepared, Anderson fell ill and suspected poisoning. He told a neighbor, then confronted Richards the next day. They fought, and Richards killed him with a hammer or hatchet, or possibly a gun. Accounts differ. Anderson's body was found buried under coal in his cellar. Richards denied poisoning, claiming Anderson attacked him with a knife, and he acted in self-defense. Even in confession, he lied, perhaps to hide the cowardice of poisoning a man before killing him. Richards fled Kearney, knowing the bodies would be found. As he prepared to leave with Anderson's horses, neighbors arrived, suspicious of Anderson's absence. Richards claimed Anderson was inside, then fled on horseback to Bloomington. His reign of terror was nearing its end. He traveled east through Omaha and Chicago, meeting up with Jasper Harrelson and another escaped prisoner. They passed through Wheeling, West Virginia, and into Ohio, reaching Richards' hometown of Mount Pleasant. The irony was stark. The respectable young man who left to seek his fortune returned as a wanted killer. On December 16, 1878, Nebraska Governor Silas Garber issued a $200 warrant for Richards' arrest, about $6,000 today. On December 20th, Richards attended a ballroom dance in Mount Pleasant with two women. His boldness, attending a public event as a wanted man, showed his confidence in his charm. But his luck ran out. A wanted poster had circulated, and Constable McGrew recognized him. With penitentiary guard folks armed with shotguns, they found Richards in a field with the women. Unarmed, he surrendered, later saying he'd have fought if not for the women. It was his only act of decency. In jail in Steubenville, Ohio, Richards wrote 2 newspaper articles, confessing to 9 murders over 3 years. His chilling account showed no remorse. "I have killed 9 persons, and I can't say I feel any worse for it." Sheriffs David Anderson and Martin brought him back to Nebraska, avoiding areas where he might be lynched due to public outrage. His crimes, killing entire families, including children, had betrayed the frontier's code of trust. Authorities suspected he was part of an outlaw gang, possibly its leader, and linked him to the 9 confessed murders, hinting he may have killed more. His trial began January 16, 1879, in Minden, Nebraska, with Judge William Gaslin presiding. District Attorney Schofield prosecuted, and lawyer Savage defended. Schofield charged Richards with first-degree murder for the Harsons and Anderson. Richards pleaded not guilty, claiming Anderson's killing was self-defense. The trial was a formality. His confession and evidence were overwhelming. 7 witnesses testified about Anderson's body, and Richards admitted to killing him with a hammer after an argument, claiming Anderson reached for a hatchet. After 2 hours, the jury found him guilty. He was sentenced to hang on April 26, 1879. Richards remained cheerful and indifferent. Sheriff Martin announced the public execution, despite fears of crowd violence. Between 2,000 and 25,000 people showed up, tearing down barriers in their anger. At 1 p.m., Richards was led to the gallows. He defended his actions, claiming Anderson's killing was self-defense and denying the Harson murders. He claimed to have found God, asking the crowd to sing, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." His final words were, "Jesus be with me now." At 1:17 p.m., he was hanged, taking 15 minutes to die. As reported by the St. Louis Globe-Democrat, Richards was Nebraska's first execution since statehood in 1867. Many described him as charismatic, hiding his darkness behind charm. When asked about his lack of remorse, he recalled killing a litter of kittens as a child, bashing their heads against a tree and feeling no guilt, only fun. This showed his monstrous nature was rooted early, not just from the asylum or frontier. Forensic psychologist Catherine Ramsland in 2018 compared him to Ted Bundy, both charismatic, remorseless killers who used trust to kill. After his execution, a photographer captured Richards' corpse in a coffin. Doctors wanted his body for study, but he refused. His grave was guarded, but his body was stolen, later returned. In 1882, the Kearney County Gazette displayed his skull in their window. Richards is now known as Nebraska's first documented serial killer, offering insight into serial murder before it was understood. His story reminds us evil can hide behind charm and trust. He killed at least 9, destroyed families and scarred communities. His crimes thrived in a trusting, isolated society, unprepared for such a monster. The Nebraska fiend's legacy warns us that evil often hides in plain sight, and the cost of missing it is measured in lives lost.